Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back to the Vet S.O.S. Network. Remember, you do not have to drown in the sea of transition. You grab that Vet S.O.S. Lifeline. We are here to help. And today, sitting on the stoop, we're about to get to school. We're not just talking about brain health. We're stepping into a conversation that could change lives. Because too many veterans, the battle didn't end when the uniform came off. It followed them home in the form of headaches, memory loss, brain fog, and sleepless nights. I know. I felt every single one of those. And a system that doesn't always have the answers. But what if the problem hasn't been fully understood and the solution has been hiding in plain sight? Today, with a man who's not only served this country in uniform, but now he is on the front lines of a different kind of mission, healing the invisible wounds of war. Our guest, Dr. Chris, he's a U.S. Army veteran, clinical director, and one of fewer than 80 board-certified cranio-cervical specialists in the nation. Here we go. Through his work at Cerebral Chiropractic Center and his leadership with the Advanced Orthonautical Institute, he's pioneered a precision-based approach that's challenging everything we thought we knew about concussion and traumatic brain injury. We're talking about real research, people, with real results and real hope for those who've been suffering in silence far too long. This isn't just a conversation. This is going to be a wake-up call, definitely for me. So if I know it's going to be for me, it's going to be for the listeners and the viewers out there. So if you ever felt like you've been overlooked or misunderstood, or if you've been searching for answers that never came in, today's the day. Now let's lean in. Doc, what's going on, boss? How we doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Wow. It was a great conversation. And what they said in the green room, a great conversation to where I shared my military journey with you, and you shared some answers I've been looking for, because I shared with some of the brain traumatic that I had, and I said, well, this is the procedure that I had to go through, and what's your thought? And he's like, man, that's a real good question. But before we get into why we're here, I got a little bit of you. What's the scoop on Dr. Chris? Let's just get a quick background, because I know the listeners and the viewers, they want to know. They want to know, before we get into this, my TBI conversation.
Well, yeah, a little about me. Like you said, I'm a U.S. Army veteran, so I was proud to serve from 2003 to 2013, and I loved it. But I actually got out of the military in order to help the military. I was actually trying to become an upper cervical chiropractor within the Army, and at the time I was exiting right after I finished grad school, ready to go. I actually couldn't get a position because the Army did not open a single slot. So I realized I had to exit in order to actually help the people I was trying to help the most. But a little background, yeah, I grew up in New Jersey, not far from you, right?
Nice.
Yeah.
So you understand the Brooklynese when I was coming out with it, huh?
Yeah, I understand the Brooklynese. The many, many dialects.
Right.
No, I grew up in New Jersey, joined the Army when I was 18. Honestly, I did not know much of what I was going to do with my life. So for me, it was an opportunity to have a little adventure, potentially go to school, and just take a little bit of a leap. And started off actually as an engineer in the military. In the engineer corps as a heavy construction equipment operator. Did that for about 6 years. Deployed once while I was in 2004 to 2005. I was actually in Kuwait during that time. And then when I came back, served a little more as an engineer, and then got into the medical corps as a training NCO. I wasn't actually in a medical role. I was just doing more of the military training from Army Reserve position for the Western United States military or medical units. And while I was in undergrad, got married to my wife. We moved out to California where I went to grad school at Life Chiropractic College West, and then moved to St. Petersburg, Florida, right after graduating and getting out of the military, where I started practice. And I've been here for 13 years now.
Wow.
In St. Petersburg, got 6 kids. We actually just had
Nice.
our 6th 4 weeks ago. So
Congrats.
thank you, man.
Hey, it's pretty quiet over there because I know a newborn that keep you up late at night.
Oh, I'm not at home. I'm at the office because I knew it would
Okay.
be loud.
And this is also what made you say after you completed your military service, you went to grad school, you went to get your degree. What made you say there has to be a better answer for veterans dealing with brain injuries?
So while I was in this started when I was in school. This
Mm,
me trying to figure out how to provide a solution and understand the solution here. Um while I was in grad school, I started to see this problem with MTBI. It actually started in undergrad. So my undergrad was in athletic training. So I'd be
mm,
field side with the sports teams. Some of the players would get concussions. We do these field side evaluations, and we were testing cranial nerves. And if they showed signs, any positive signs of concussion, we send them out for an MRI. So basically, if they had cranial nerve problems, which
mm,
come from the brain stem, then we would say it's a concussion. But then we were told that it's because the brain bounces around inside the skull. But if it did that, then the areas that are impacting the skull aren't the areas where those nerves that we were testing are even coming from. And I was like, that's weird. That doesn't match. It's not even the same place in the brain that it's coming from or going to.
mm.
When we sent the players to get MRIs, I don't remember a single one that came back with any positive findings. And I'm like, okay, we keep calling this a brain injury and nobody can find the injury. But these players aren't okay afterwards. They'd get injured
Right.
more frequently. They'd sprain knees and ankles more often after a concussion. They'd have headaches more frequently, neck pain, couldn't think straight, school function would decline. And a lot of them
Mm.
could fake it and, get back in the game and pass whatever test they were, put
Yeah.
on. But it left this like burning question in my head saying, hey, there's something missing here because the model isn't matching. And the way they're saying we need to test and evaluate isn't matching what they're saying the injury is. I didn't have enough knowledge at the time to know what to do. So when I got to grad school, finally I was able to dive quite a bit deeper. Um,
Mm,
and so what I did is I dove really deep into neurology and started to put a working model together. And that's when I got into what's now my specialty field, which is upper cervical chiropractic. It is one of our subspecialties within the chiropractic field and quite a bit different than the general field. We're much more focused on brain health. And so as I started to see this model, I was seeing that a lot of the symptoms that we're associating with concussion and post-concussive syndrome are actually coming from the upper neck. And so at the time when I was
mm,
finishing up grad school and I was getting out of the military, I had seen such a consistency to both the link between a neck problem and these symptoms. And when we dealt with that neck problem, when we corrected the problem, the resolution of those symptoms, I actually went to my commander, who at the time was a state senator. He was a DO, and he was the head of our division of the medical command. And I said, "Sir, I want to be a chiropractor." I said, "Commission me and immediately deploy me, and I'll go
mm,
right overseas." And I said, I'll take care of all the guys who are in blast injuries, have no flesh
mm,
wounds, no fractures, but they have these MTBI type symptoms. I said, I guarantee we could deal with them in country and get them right back in the field and then be actually okay. And he liked the idea. So he
yeah.
went and he tried to figure out what was going on with getting me commissioned as a chiropractor. And he came back a month later. He was like, there is so much red tape around this. He's like, I don't even know where to start. So I said, look, sir, the only other thing I can do is get out of the military in order to help the military.
Mm,
And so I ended up just letting my contract run up and got out, started practice. And that's I felt like that's when I really went to work to try to solve the
Right.
problem. And it's been 13 years, and we are just at the cusp of bringing it right back into the military now,
Oh,
13
that's
years
good.
later.
That's good because, like you said, being out there on the battlefield on the front stage, because with the blast radius and stuff, and
Hmm.
inside and on deployments, that would be a huge help. So, what
Hmm.
are some of the like? So you said it's a huge red tape, right? So, what do you think that is missing when it comes to understanding brain injuries, especially mild TBI? Like, what's the big miss?
Well, I think first off, it's the definition. So I've met people that have had the exact same origin of the problem, like maybe it's a hit to the head or it's a close proximity to a blast. One gets diagnosed with a TBI, the other gets diagnosed with an MTBI. Same symptoms, same amount of
Mhm.
time, totally different diagnosis. And when I ask them what's the difference, they don't know. When I ask the doctors what's the difference, they don't really know. I mean, I've had to actually come up with my own working definition just because nobody can make up their mind. And
Right.
so, I just for the sake of our conversation, I think this is a really good delineator. If we say
Mm.
TBI, traumatic brain injury, I would describe that as a direct damage to the cortex of the brain. Like the material of the brain
Right.
itself has physical damage that's visible and needs repair, like a wound. It could be shrapnel in the skull. It could be a fracture of the skull that goes, inward and messes with the brain, or it could be some shearing force that's obvious and notable, right? Mild traumatic brain injury would be significant neurological symptoms with no visible damage to the cortex of the brain.
Mhm.
And that's what I
Wow.
would describe as what we call the invisible wound, right? When we
Right.
talk about MTBI being one of those invisible wounds,
Right.
it's a better differentiator because now we're saying we can't see the problem, but clearly you have one. Where is it coming
Mhm.
from? And that's where the mystery is.
And the mystery and all definitely in the veteran community is like that silent battle, right? Because we
Yeah.
talked about it, right?
Hmm.
Usually we don't like to say what's really going on, right? Because we want to stay active. We don't want that stigma on us, you
Yep.
know. So what's the scoop on that? You think is that in the silent battle and definitely inside the veteran community about getting identified as having a TBI?
I are you talking about? Oh, here, reframe the question. So I want to make sure I'm
So I
understand what
know
you want.
like in the veteran community, right? It's like the silent battle
Hmm.
about TBI. It's the headaches and for me, I shared like for a long time I didn't go in for help
Oh yeah, yeah.
or to see, hey man, what's going on? Why I'm losing my thoughts? Why I can't remember anything? Or it just must be, it must be old age, or I don't want to go and get help because I know it's gonna lead to the second and third and fourth order effects. So is that that daily internal battle?
Yeah. So you want me to dive into where I'm seeing it come from?
Yes.
Okay. So what happens when we get an impact to the head or a significant whiplash type injury or some sort of a blast injury that and just to be clear, it's something that's far enough away, it's not killing you.
Mhm.
You're guarded enough that you're not getting shrapnel wounds, so you're not getting like flesh wounds, but you are concussed from that blast or dazed or your bell got rung, basically.
Mhm.
Okay. So we're just putting in that category for the sake of the conversation. Um, it's it's very difficult for you to have something that affects the brain, which is well protected inside the skull, without it damaging the structures that hold the neck to the skull. And the reason why
Mm.
is your brain is actually protected to it's up to approximately 60 G's of force just by its natural design. It sits in
Wow.
cerebrospinal fluid, encased in a bone cage that's built to withstand some impacts. That's why we have fighters that don't cave each other's skulls in right away. Like
Right.
it's actually built to take a hit, and take a hit while the brain stays relatively safe. The fluid barrier from the cerebrospinal fluid actually protects it from impacting the sides. And it's approximately the same density as the brain itself, the fluid in the brain itself. And so it's a really, really safe environment in there.
Mm.
So it can withstand approximately 60 Gs of force before you start to injure the brain. Now,
Wow.
blast injuries can be upwards of 150 Gs of force. So true blast injuries actually far exceed the capacity of the brain to protect, or the structures around the brain to protect the tissue of the brain itself. There is definitely room for true brain injury and brain damage from those. But you can get the ligaments that hold the neck to the skull, like for the head to sit on top of the
Mhm.
neck, those ligaments can start to tear at about 4.5 Gs of force, which, just to put it in perspective, it's about a 7 to 10 mile an hour car accident.
That's it.
That's it. So
Wow.
basically, like when you look at it from a structural standpoint, your neck is not designed for impact at all. Right?
Mm.
In the same way your body's not designed for knife wounds. Like,
Right.
like we're not designed for damage, we're designed for function. We just happen to damage each other in war. And so we when we enter into the military service, we train for war and we harden our bodies, and we do build a lot of resilience for it. But there's certain structures that just remain vulnerable. The skin remains vulnerable to bullets and knives,
Mm.
and ligaments remain vulnerable to high G forces when encountered. They just do. And so
Wow.
what happens is when you encounter those concussive type forces, even if the brain is not directly damaged, you can start to experience damage, misalignment, destabilization, and derangement, which means like if something is arranged, it's put right. If something is
Mm.
deranged, it's put out of its right order.
Right.
So you can have derangement of the structures between the head and the neck quite easily, far before the brain gets damaged.
Wow.
And so what I've been looking at for quite a few years now is that what we keep calling a concussion or a mild traumatic brain injury, the invisible wound type, right?
Mhm.
I actually am seeing that most of them have significant neck injuries, and most of the time, no brain findings.
Wow. Wow. That's one of the things that, I started to do, like, because when I was in the military, I always used to like, man, why is this happening to me? Like, why I can't remember? And a lot of times I had, some doctors trying to tell me the truth, but I didn't want to hear it. Right. I like, I did but I know I needed to. I know I need to, because it's like, man, you could have another one, and it could send you off into, to where, if you don't address it now, 5, 10, 15 years later, you're gonna see some actions behind that.
Hmm.
So
But here's
why do you think
the
that?
question is why, right?
Right. Why
So
do you
so
think that?
so two things. The reason why we're vulnerable to a second injury more easily, I don't think is because the brain can't handle a second one. I think in a lot of these mild traumatic brain injuries and concussions, it's far less that the brain is susceptible and far more that if you already injured the joint structures that hold things together, that joint is now
Mm,
susceptible to a easier injury at a lower force. So it doesn't take as much to get a second one. In the same way, if you sprain an ankle and then go play the same sport you sprained it with, you're definitely more susceptible to another injury.
right,
And nobody ever explained the susceptibility. They just say you are susceptible. It's true in sports, it's true in the military, it's true across the board. They just say the susceptibility is higher, but if you say, but why, they can't answer it because they're
wow,
still saying it's a brain thing. So the brain is just more susceptible, but they couldn't find the first injury in the first place. So how
wow,
are you saying it's susceptible when you didn't even prove there was an injury at all? You
mm,
see how it doesn't add up when you look at it from
right,
that perspective? But the other
wow,
side of it, you are right about this. When you have a concussion or an MTBI, there's also a susceptibility to long-term symptoms that can worsen over time. Brain fog leading to cognitive decline, dizziness leading to vertigo and instability, right?
mm,
Postural, your posture seems to start collapsing. You can't hold yourself up as tall and
right,
strong as you used to, leading to, spinal degeneration in the long run. headaches go into migraines, go into debilitating pain,
Mm.
neck pain that just causes the neck to seize up to the point where you can't move it. I mean, and the list keeps going.
Wow.
Oculomotor issues. So like people, they're like, man, I'm not seeing as clearly, and eventually they're like losing eye control, and their eyes are twitching all over the place. Or they're, I've heard this from a lot of them. They driving across a bridge, and when they're going past the cables, their eyes
Get
start
dizzy.
freaking out, and they go into
Get dizzy. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they're just saying it happens. But I think a better question is, why is it happening? And so what we
Mhm.
found, and this is what we've been looking into. I've been looking into this for 16 years now. Um, when we look at the upper neck, the reason why it's associated with so many symptoms is because of the structures that run through it. So it's not just that you sprain a ligament and it hurts. It's that when you take structures that should be well aligned and you have really sensitive stuff that runs through it, if you derange it, if you misalign or destabilize that area, then those bony structures can start to affect the stuff running through it. And the keystone things that we see it affecting are the vertebral arteries, the jugular vein, the lower portion of the brainstem, the cerebrospinal fluid flow in and around the brain, and the glymphatic system, which is like the drainage system of the brain.
Right.
And so basically a single structural misalignment or instability in the upper neck can potentially affect brainstem function, like the vestibular system, which it controls and coordinates balance
Wow.
and coordination. It can start to irritate the trigeminal nucleus, which will drive headaches and migraines and neck pain and facial pain. It can affect the oculomotor centers, so it starts to affect your ability to control eye movements effectively. It can affect blood flow going into the brain, so you end up with blood flow insufficiencies, which means that the
Wow.
brain does not get the blood it needs to operate at full capacity. And if you leave that over a long enough period of time, you end up with cognitive decline. With the jugular vein, we'll see the backup of the drainage of blood out of the brain. So even if blood is pumping in, if it's not draining out at the same rate, then you're going to end up with pressure building in the head. You end up in the middle part of the head, behind the eyes, and various other places. If the jugular veins don't drain effectively, then it can back up the filtration of the brain. So the brain is supposed to be able to clean out every single night as you sleep. And so if it's not filtering at full capacity, then you're accumulating even just basic metabolic waste, and that drives brain fog, right? So the brain fog
Wow.
grows longer and longer until you start to get this thing to drain effectively. You can end up with pinpoint pains because the ligaments are torn. Um, the postural muscles get destabilized, and it's all from a single structural problem that's more logical in that type of
Wow.
injury than the brain smacking in the inside of the skull.
And that's why it's important to get checked out, right? Right. When you think so, like what you seen that change. I know that you probably seen a lot of patients in your time. Like, what's something that you witnessed in your patients that changed you? That not just professionally but personally, like you seen it, and like, man, if they would have came to me a little bit sooner, or if I would have
Yeah.
been there a little bit sooner, maybe I could have corrected. And now they have to deal with this lifelong pain or lifelong issue.
Well, that's the thing. I'm seeing people that have problems 40 years ago of this
Mm.
type that are actually recovering, getting treatment now. So it's not as permanent as we think. It's that if you treat the symptom without treating the root, if you deal with how it feels, not how it's functioning, then you're gonna only temporarily ease the problem, but not actually resolve it. The body is designed at its core to heal, and the brain is too. And there's a lot of malleability in the brain. I mean, there's a point in time where that adaptation stops, but I'm telling you, it's a lot longer than most of us think.
Wow.
I see it all the time. I'll tell you one thing though that I've seen over and over that it's still to this day surprising, and we're just really scratching the surface of how significant this is. I remember about 3 years into practice, I had this one patient, wasn't military, right? But this lady came in and she was deeply, deeply depressed. I'm talking like, I don't know why I'm living. I'm just floating through life. I'm miserable. I feel nothing. Wouldn't get out of bed till like 11 a.m., 12, like literally just there, just nothing going on. She came in, her husband basically dragged her in, um, just convinced her, and she didn't really want to engage. We got her under care. And then 2 days later, she came back after we did the first upper cervical correction in the way we do it at our clinic. And I remember walking in the door. She looks me square in the eye. She goes, "What did you do to me?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "What did
She
you do
feels
to me?"
better,
No, listen. She goes, "I have been depressed for 5 years." She goes, "I don't understand what's going on. I'm waking up at 7 a.m. I have so much energy. I don't know what to do.
wow.
I'm reading a book for an hour, going to exercise, and it's only 10 a.m. and I don't know what to do with myself." And I'm like, I don't know how to explain what's going on right now. Cause I'm like 3 years into
Right.
practice at this point,
Right.
right? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And it was this one eye opener where I was like, are we helping mental health and didn't even realize it?
Mm,
And so I've been doing a lot of homework, especially in this last year, on the mental health side of things. Cause I'm like, look, again, we can't be making changes consistently without there being reason. And we see
right.
a ton of people with chronic anxiety, hypervigilance, and PTSD of various types. And this is the best way I know how to describe the difference. When somebody has chronic stress or anxiety, there's situational stress and anxiety and
Mm.
physiological stress and anxiety. So situational could be like you're overwhelmed. It's tax week and you got to finish all your stuff. Things at home aren't so great. Um, you're stressed out at work and have way too many responsibilities. It could also be, childhood was rough and I never dealt with it. I've been through a lot. These are all situations, some from the distant past and some from the current, present state. And if you the way that the emotional part of the brain, the limbic system works is that when we feel fear, when we feel scared, when we feel like our life is threatened or even our future is threatened in some way, we feel a threat, it activates a fight or flight response, which is normal,
Mm,
right? If a bear is going to attack you in the woods, you better
right.
have a fight or flight response, and fighting it is probably not a good idea. So get going and run,
Right.
but that response is a survival response. And unfortunately, we end up like sitting in it and living in it. Sometimes because we're struggling with dealing with the stuff that's going on.
Mm,
But sometimes that fight or flight response has nothing to do with the situations we've been in the past or we're in right now. Sometimes that fight or flight response is being driven by nerve connections coming from areas like the cranio-cervical junction, right where the brain meets
wow.
the neck. And it has connections directly into the limbic system, and it's driving the brain into a fight or flight response, and you can't figure out where it's coming from. So structural issues can actually cause mental health decline.
Wow.
And it's
That's
also
that's
it's
so
also why
good.
but it's also why there's people that are highly resistant to medication and mental health therapy because it has nothing to do with them not dealing with something. And it has so much more to do with the fact that the brain isn't even firing right.
And that's exactly what you're doing is like working at the intersection of research and real human pain, right? Like, because
Right.
you can't just say, man, I don't know, like I'm getting up early, I'm doing this, I'm doing. How do you carry that responsibility, hearing that after you did a correction, and now she is just like full throttle now? Like, how to carry that responsibility? Like, man, and he's like, well, I just did this. Now you don't have to. You've been dealing with this for 5 years, and
hmm
you just came to me, and we did a correction, and now you're literally up and running now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's unusual for things to go that fast, but for
Mhm.
me, like every once in a while I'll have someone, it's like a night, it's like flipping a light switch. The whole thing is just
Uh,
flipping a light switch. And they go from sleepless nights to sleeping 10 hours that night. And they're like, what in the world did you do? And I think someone who puts it really, really well, Dr. Daniel Amen, he owns the Amen clinics. I don't know if you ever heard of him before, but he talks about, he's actually a neuropsychiatrist, and he talks about how he believes that even his own field has framed the issue wrong, that a lot of what we call mental health issues are actually brain health issues. That the
Mm.
physical brain is not healthy enough to actually go through any of what it's trying to go through. And so you basically cave in response to an overwhelmed physical brain. It's just beyond its capacity. And so they've restructured a lot of their care to, instead of just drug the person into a different outcome, they nourish that patient. They do hyperbaric. They'll still include some mental health therapy, but it's in the context of growing a healthier brain and dealing with why the brain was declining in the first place. And the results are incredible. And then we're starting to
Mhm.
see this from a structural standpoint. But again, if you've had a brain that hasn't had proper blood flow, the nerve signals going into and out of the brain have been compromised, it hasn't been filtering right, it hasn't been draining effectively, that's going to compromise the health of the brain. And that brain is not resilient enough to handle even everyday life. And so you crumple under the
Wow.
pressure of even basic responsibilities.
Wow. So that would, this is I appreciate your expertise and your knowledge sharing here on the Vet SOS network because uh, a lot of veterans and I told you, as long as somebody's breathing and they drawing breath, this information is great. But
Hmm.
I do want to tap into the veteran community. Like, I kind of want to be real right now because I shared my journey and what I had to get exposed to, I guess, if I'll say that. The current system, you think it's like failing when it comes to brain injury, or like what is something that can be done to I tell you what would be great is if your organization could team up with the VA and actually have veterans go through this process right here to start from there, right? Instead of just
Yeah.
medication, right? Because medication is not for. I told you I went through talk therapy, then went to medication, then you know what I'm saying? Like they just kept moving. Okay, well now let's try this, so let's try that, but they never offered me chiropractic. Like, hey, let's go this route right here. Let's see if this could help alleviate some of your
Hmm.
pressures or concerns.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, actually, as we were talking, I just saw an email come through. So when you asked that question, I went ahead and opened it because it's someone who's been looking into our attempt to work with the VA. And I'm telling you, I've been at this for years. I've been putting in a proposal now for a year for a pilot program with the VA to
Mm,
bring it's cranio-cervical work. So I guess I should clarify it. Um, Although I'm technically a chiropractor, we have, I would say, I think it's four main subspecialties, like primary subspecialties in our field. We have pediatric care, so the
okay.
kids. We have functional medicine, which is much more nutritional and blood labs and testing from internal function standpoint. We have functional neurology, which is like brain and nerve pathway rehab. And I'm generalizing, so
Right.
like, and then we have upper cervical chiropractic care, which actually is a distinct, subspecialty with our own standards
Mm,
of care. And the way we approach issues in the upper cervical spine, in that cranio-cervical junction, where the skull and neck meet, is categorically different than the general field would. And it's because we're dealing
mm,
with much more vulnerable cases, people with very serious neurological issues or very significant instabilities. A good way of putting it is, you know how chiropractors will typically like twist and crack the
right.
spine and the neck.
Yeah.
Um, if you had a sprained ankle and I said, "Hey, you have a sprained ankle, let me help it by twisting it," you wouldn't like me very much because
No.
I'd be hurting you pretty good, right? So if you have sprained or compromised ligaments in the upper neck and someone says, "Hey, let me twist and crack your neck," you're actually dealing with a pretty unstable structure. So our approach is a lot more gentle, a lot more precise, and we
Mm,
do it because we're able to deal with a category of cases that are really not great candidates for a more manual or I don't want to say aggressive, but a forceful approach to care. And on top of that, in order to make sustained changes in the brain, it's not as much about making it crack, pop, and feel good. You actually
Mm.
have to get it into a proper biomechanical alignment in order to optimize blood flow, brainstem function, and some of the cerebrospinal fluid flow patterns. So you have to, because we're dealing with such sensitive structures and we understand the influence it has over those structures, we do have our own standards of care. And so what I'm trying to bring to the VA is a pilot program that opens up a category of referrals to
Mm.
cranio-cervical specialists that fall in that umbrella of that standard of care. And it does intentionally exclude general chiropractors, but it's actually to protect the vulnerable cases from getting bad results
Mm.
or mixed results. Because if we do it safely and correctly, we can show the VA, you think chiropractors are here for back pain and because you feel a little bit tight, we're actually in the brain health category. And, some of us are actually dealing with brain health, and we're trying to bring that to the forefront of veteran care. And so it has been a challenge, to be totally honest. And we need people to pull some weight for us to get this through so that we can start to help the veterans and show the VA that there is another avenue that's sustainable and far more impactful than some of the tools that they have currently available.
Right. And if someone's skeptical about hearing it, like, hey, we should try this approach,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say to challenge their thinking? Like, let's look at it from a different angle.
Yeah.
What's some of the things that you was like, hey, let's look at it from the mental health aspect, or let's look at it from this aspect where it could help the veteran, where it can help people have a better quality of life.
Right. So I do have a lot of, I mean, one of the biggest hurdles is if they hear that I'm any type of chiropractor, there's already a preconceived notion about what I do, right?
Mm.
That's one of the battles I have to fight every single day. It's not even close to the approach I take, right?
Mm.
We're doing very careful, calculated corrections of the alignment of the upper cervical spine to influence the nerve structures within it. But to me, I always look at it like you have to play the matching game. Like
Mm.
if you want to solve a problem, you have to clearly define the problem you're trying to solve, and then the tool you're using to solve the problem better match the nature of the problem itself. So if you have a structural misalignment causing interferences in nerve communication in the brainstem, irritating sensitive structures, and maybe obstructing blood flow. We call it cranio-cervical hydrodynamics,
Mm.
right? The fluid flows between the neck and the head. Um, how is a pill supposed to shift the bones?
Right.
Right? Like if you
Right.
can define the problem as structural in nature, what pill fixes that? There isn't
Right.
one. So the tool doesn't match the solution. And if I get a gunshot wound, there's no spinal alignment that's going to make it stop bleeding. I better go to the ER and get that thing patched up. Or if I'm on a battlefield, I'm calling the medic. Like
Right.
I want something to plug the hole, right? So the tool has to match the injury. So we have this category, MTBI, and we go,
Mm.
we don't know what it really is. It's a mild traumatic brain injury. You go, well, what's that injury? And they're like, well, I'm not sure, but it's when you have headaches and dizziness and everything after a head impact. But if you ask the question again, well, but what's the injury? They're like, I don't
Mm.
know, but I want to go ahead and treat it. And you go, but treat what? You didn't even define what the problem was yet.
Right.
So like, how do you expect to actually turn off the long-term effects of a problem that you can't even define clearly? And so the whole
Makes
the whole
sense.
reason I'm doing any of this work and why we're launching the MTBI research that we're about to do, the reason behind it is because we don't even have a working model that makes sense. So this research study isn't just a study to see if this approach causes results. The framing of the research study is actually to redefine the model of what MTBI even is. Because if we can
Yeah.
clearly do that, then we can build a model of treatment that matches the problem that happened in the incident. And then
Yeah.
we can have the confidence that we can actually get well and sustain it.
And that's all about healing the body.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the skepticism comes from even the way we look at it. We go, I don't believe in this, but I do believe in that. And I'm like, that to me, I'm like, that's not even the right approach to to trying to figure out a solution for you. It's not about belief. It's first and foremost define the problem. And once we understand the nature of the problem or the injury or the primary root cause driver of what you're experiencing, then we have to find the solutions that match that problem.
Mm.
And if we do that, then it
Wow.
becomes far more pragmatic and far less about belief.
Right. And when someone starts healing physically, what changes do you see mentally, emotionally, and stress? Like, do you see any changes when I know you already shared one time? Like, what other
Yeah.
changes do you see in the other domains once they start feeling healing physically?
All right. The most common things we see improve and the greatest majority of the time actually resolve and stay resolved. Headaches,
Mm,
migraines, dizziness, vertigo, unless the inner ears are truly involved, which a lot of times they're not. Um, Brain fog is
mm,
very common to improve dramatically. Sleep, chronic anxiety drops dramatically. That chronic stress or anxiety feeling, that fight or flight response
mm.
really drops. What's interesting about the fight or flight is when you start to come from that sympathetic tone down to the parasympathetic tone, the fight or flight down to that rest or digest tone in the brain. When we're in fight or flight, every system of our body supports survival. You know
Yes.
what's not good for survival? Complex thinking, right? Like if you're in a bear fight, do
Mm.
you need to do an algebra problem or do you need to
No,
fight?
you
Yeah.
gotta fight.
Yeah. So you don't need to recall history. You don't need to do
Right.
algebra. You don't need to do any of this stuff. So when we're in fight or flight, like have you ever been stressed out and you can't solve a problem for the life of you? And then you go to
Yes.
sleep, let it all go, and you wake up in the morning, you're like, oh, I have the answer.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
It's actually because cognition, like complex problem solving, prefrontal cortex type activity, it
Mm,
all thrives in a parasympathetic tone. That's rest and digest. But it's shut off to save energy in a sympathetic tone, which is fight or flight, so that it can divert that energy to survival mechanisms like reflex responses
mm.
and muscular control, right?
Wow.
So if you're in a bear fight, guess what else you don't need to do? Fight bacteria, because bears will kill you faster than a bacteria every
Right.
single time. So
Right.
it gets compromised when you're in a fight or flight state, when you're in that anxiety, is your immune system, because it takes a huge amount of energy. I mean, the two processes in the body that take the most amount of energy is immunity and digestion. And so you know
Mm.
what to shut off when you're in a fight? Immunity and
Immunity and
digestion, because
digestion.
you need to survive. You don't need your burger to digest. You need to
Right.
survive so that you can get to a place where your burger can digest. Because if you don't have the next 5 minutes, it doesn't matter about the next 3 hours, you know?
Right.
So these are the systems that get affected. Your heart rate goes up, blood pressure goes up, digestion goes down, peeing and pooping, like any motion, like you don't
Motor
need any
skills.
motion. Yeah, you
Right.
don't. Your muscles are going to tense. You're going to feel like rigid in your body because you're getting ready to defend and maybe take a few hits, but it's all survival. Cognition drops, reflexes heighten. That's why you get spastic. And if you stay in that state long enough, your adrenal glands are pumping out adrenaline and epinephrine and norepinephrine. And if it reaches its end of its capacity, you end up in adrenal fatigue, and then you crash and burn out.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
we see people that are like at the tail end of this problem. They've been living in this for so long, and they start to get out of that sympathetic tone into that parasympathetic tone. And you know what improves? Sleep,
Okay.
thinking, digestion,
Everything.
heart rate,
Yes.
blood
Full
pressure,
circle.
the
Full
full
circle.
circle, because it's just basic physiology of what happens in sympathetic or parasympathetic tone. And so
Wow.
we see this all of the time. But I think it's just been poorly articulated and poorly described. And so it's been reduced down to, like in my, I hear this all the time, like, oh, you're a chiropractor? Doc, I hurt right here. I just want to feel better. And I'm like, if you had any idea what we're capable of through the work that we do, you'd be
Right,
like, man, my brain's not working, Doc. Can you turn it back on? And I'd be like, all right, now we're talking.
right.
Now we're talking about something that's truly in the capacity of what we're doing and far more significant than something that's hurt and feeling a little bit better.
So
Look,
you know
I
this
know,
is
but
good.
I'm around these vets all the time. I'm around the
Right.
vets that have served in wars past. I think, you know, one of the things I noticed is when I was overseas, that's when we were up armoring all our vehicles because we
Mm,
recognized we were in a totally different war, and they were using these weird things called IEDs, these roadside bombs. So we were like,
right,
man, we're in a different fight. We're not just getting bullets thrown at us. We don't have no idea where any of this stuff's coming from,
right.
and it's big. And so what happened is when we armored the vehicles, we had less flesh wounds and more concussive wounds.
Yes.
And then we had these mysterious invisible wounds. Before that, the only invisible wounds were true mental health trauma of just going through battle. It was just
Yeah.
overwhelm. But once we got to this one, once we got to like the Iraq and Afghan wars, we had armored vehicles that some of them could withstand like full IED blasts, and nobody inside would get burned. No one would get
But
a
you get your
shrapnel
bell
wound.
rung. You'll
You
get your
got your
bell
bell
rung.
rung so hard, and on top of that, you're wearing a helmet weighing who knows how many pounds, depending on what gear you got on top,
Mm,
and nothing bracing the neck in between with a huge
yeah.
amount
Yes.
more weight. So you're getting massive whiplash injuries, but you think it's in your brain. And guess what's never checked? Your neck
Your neck. Yeah.
in any capacity. And even if they do check the neck, and I deal with this all the time, a lot of times when somebody is a neck expert, they start by evaluating the C2, the second vertebra going down, because they're checking to see if you have like a disc herniation or degeneration or some sort of instability. There is almost no category of doctor that looks at the cranio-cervical junction. The neurologists skip over it. Most imaging centers won't image it. It's not in
Wow.
any standard imaging package anywhere, and most of the radiologists don't know what they're looking for in that area. Not because they're dumb, they're really smart people,
Right.
but they look for what they're trained to be concerned with, and looking at alar ligament instability is not on their list most of the time.
Wow.
Looking for slight brainstem compression from, the second vertebra, like flexing back into it, is not on their list. Looking for
Wow.
jugular vein compression from a misaligned structure is not on their list.
Wow.
And so it's left as what we call the invisible wounds. And
Wow.
my work, I mean, this is the best phrase I've been able to put, my work into, is our job is making the invisible wounds visible and
Right.
showing people what's actually going on and why they have the symptoms they have with concrete evidence and total scientific rationale, so you don't feel crazy anymore.
Man, I appreciate that. And now, so here, here on the scoop, I like to sit down on the scoop, and I usually go in and I watch other podcasts and I watch other, recordings, stuff that you've been on. And I was like, man, I can't wait till he comes sit down on the stoop so I can ask these questions. Like, one thing that was mentioned was we're not just treating symptoms, we're addressing the root.
hmm
What's the scoop on that?
I mean, it really is that simple. Look, great analogy. If if you got a room in your house, it's got a light, it's got a computer, it's got a printer, it's got a TV in it, and you notice that nothing in that room is working, right? But you look
Mm,
down, you're in that room, and you're like, that's weird. So you peek out the hall and you see a room down the hall, and that room's got power, lights on, TV's on. Where do you think the problem is with that pattern, that particular one?
I'll probably go check the power strip or something.
Well, no. But it's a light over here, a computer over here, a TV over here, and a totally different switch, and nothing works. Where would you think the problem is?
In the wall, that gotta be the current coming to the room.
One of the the breaker, right?
Yeah, the
Like
breaker.
like
Yeah,
the breaker might control the whole room.
right.
So if we see a pattern where it's like, well, the house has power, but this section of the house doesn't, a
Mm,
breaker is probably the more logical place we would go.
right.
What would make more sense? Going to the breaker or just buying a new TV, replacing the light bulb, buying a new computer,
Breaker first. Yeah. Hey,
breaker
go check the
first.
breaker. Right.
So what happens in medicine, like what I'm saying is that's root cause analysis and root cause intervention, right?
Mm,
I'm not going to just go every time I see something not working, just go buy another one. But what happens in medicine, this is really weird, is when something's not working, well, we go, well, we got to slice that, we got to drug that, we got to make that feel better. And the question that's not asked is, well, what's causing that?
right.
What maybe something caused it 5 years ago in a different place in the body. So a different place in time and a different location, but both are relevant to finding out why you ended up in the state that you're in. If I'm walking through my house and I bang my shin on the coffee table and my shin hurts, what's the root cause? It's the coffee
You should.
table,
Yeah.
right?
You
Like
gotta
the
whatever hurt. Yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever made it hurt.
because
Right.
it's a direct cause effect relationship. It's
Right.
not mysterious. I bang my shin on the coffee table. I have pain. Why do I have pain? It hit the coffee table. That's what
Right.
caused pain. There's no mystery. But if you go, um, for the last 5 years, my sleep has been declining and my brain fog's getting worse and my headaches are getting excruciating. What's the cause? Now we have time and location that's a mystery. And so does it make more sense to just go, you know what, we have a pill for that to put you to sleep at night, we have a pill to make your headache stop working, and we have a pill to stimulate your brain so it works a little bit faster. So here's 3 pills. Or does it make more sense to go, there's a pattern here.
Right.
Why don't we figure out what might be, these things might not be running alone. Maybe there's actually a root cause, one single root causing multiple effects. In the same way, a breaker could be one root causing multiple effects somewhere else in the house. Right?
Mm,
I don't know why in medicine we don't why is it that an electrician that goes to a trade school has a better mindset about how to evaluate root cause than a doctor who's been in school for 12 years? It's a simple question. What's causing that? And it's the question we seem to avoid the most because it actually challenges us to have to think critically about what might have gotten us to the state that we're in.
mm.
Sometimes it's direct. If you get a bullet wound, guess what? Cause, bullet. Effect,
Hey,
gunshot wound.
wound. Yeah.
Cause effect is right there. But
Right.
the ones that are frustrating us, the ones that are driving us insane, the ones that make us feel crazy, and the ones that have the medical community scratching their head are the long-term effects of wounds they don't understand.
Mm.
And they're
Wow.
not asking the right questions. Instead, they're just settling for dealing with the symptoms. And guess who's no better for it? The veterans.
Right. Wow. Man, I appreciate that inside scoop. I got another one for you, Doc. The brain doesn't forget trauma, even when the body tries to move on. What's the scoop on that?
Man, that's your question. What's the scoop on that?
Yeah.
All right. So
I love to get your take on it because it's like, man, this is good stuff because I'm thinking like, man, I finally got a subject matter expert. Now I can ask these questions so I can hear it. And then when I go back and listen to it again, I'm like, okay, so this is why my brain, I'm like, I'm trying to piece stuff together. Like I'm trying to connect the dots still.
okay. So the reason why, are you talking about both emotional and physical trauma?
Yes.
But we'll talk both.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
please.
So it actually is the same root reason.
Okay.
So you know how, let's say you did bicep curls with one arm for 6 months and none with the other arm. What's going to be the effect of that?
One bicep will get larger, supposedly, technically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're the 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 muscle will grow in response to the strain that's placed upon it.
To the
That's
stimuli,
how
yes.
that's how we build muscle. That's how we, get
Uh,
stronger. That's how we train in the military. First, put the strain on. That's why we do the training we do. And in response to the strain, we grow. That's also why drill sergeants are mean. You
Right.
know, they're I don't think they're mean. I think they care about us more than
Yeah.
anybody, because they're like, man, if I'm mean now, you'll be safe later, right? But the whole goal of being tough on you is so that you grow in response to the strain that's placed upon you, and your resilience grows. So emotionally, we grow like that. Physically, we grow like that. Neurologically, we grow according to the same principle. When we, do you play any musical instruments?
If I could, my musical instrument would be the saxophone, but I don't have the lungs for it.
Okay.
But if I
All right.
could.
No, but what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
the first time you pick up a musical instrument, unless you're some sort of savant, you're clunky with this thing. You don't know what
Right.
to do. You're uncoordinated. But the more you practice, the more you move, whether it's piano or guitar or saxophone or whatever, the more you engage in the activity, the more refinement you get. And a big part of the changes is not strength. Like with music, you're not building strength. You're building precision and refinement and smoothness. And all of
Right.
that is a result of neuroplastic changes. So the reason why that word is neuroplastic, neuro being nerve, but plastic changes are like, let's say you took a shopping bag from the grocery store, one of those plastic ones. If you poke your finger into it and pull your finger out, it'll leave an indent. Elastic is like a rubber band. You push it, you let go, and it snaps back to its original state. Plastic, once you put an imprint on it, that imprint is left. So
Gotcha.
neuroplastic changes are the imprint of changes along nerve pathways. If you use a nerve pathway over and over and over again, that nerve pathway will actually strengthen. The nerves will thicken. The synaptic cleft will have more receptor sites. You'll release more neurotransmitters, and that nerve signal will fire much faster and easier. When you don't use a nerve pathway, it's the same as not using a muscle. When it happens to a muscle, we call it atrophy. Like if you have a caster on an arm, you take it off, that muscle's shriveled up to nothing.
Shriveled up, right?
Right? So that's muscular atrophy. But in the brain or in the nervous system, it's a negative neuroplastic change where the nerves get smaller, the neurotransmitters get less abundant, the receptor sites for them shrink or reduce in number, and that signal becomes weaker and it gets harder to fire along that. So what happens in trauma, there's two types of trauma, whether physical or emotional, and it triggers two types of changes in the nerves. There's tympanic activation of nerves. So that's repetition. So like I was saying with piano, if I play over and over and over, tympanic, like timpani, it's a repetition over and over and over again, and the repetition reinforces the activity. So if I am physically or emotionally traumatized over and over and over and over and over in the same way, it's going to reinforce a trauma pathway of the brain firing and thinking certain things over and over, and the nerve pathway actually strengthens to reinforce you continuing in that activity and thought process. The other is a summation effect, where it's like a single massive event. This happens in blast injuries. This happens with like a single physical or abuse trauma, where one huge event that's physical, emotional, sometimes sexual trauma all at the same time, those will lock in because it overwhelms the nerve pathway like a tidal wave that runs across it, and then the nerves change after one encounter, but it's a strong enough encounter to reinforce that as your new normal of how you operate. And so traumas are reinforced by the same mechanisms that things like strength training cause, but on the brain and the nerves rather than the muscles and the bones.
Wow.
And so because if we understand it in that way, instead of just saying you're stuck in that mindset, when we start to engage in healthier activities and we restore the health of the brain, you actually unlock neuroplastic malleability. The brain becomes
Mm.
malleable to like positive neuroplastic changes. So we call that neuroplasticity, the ability for the brain to
Mm.
change both now and later. And so when we're stuck in these patterns, and when I say this because I want people to be encouraged, when the brain gets healthier, when you restore the normal function and the normal needs of the brain, then the brain becomes malleable to changes, even in the mental health category.
Wow. So you're saying there's a chance
Yes,
healing
sir.
is possible, but
Yeah.
we just have to look in the right place.
Hmm.
Wow. So speaking of looking in the right place, now where can they reach out to you? Please, I know we're about to come up because we're coming up on the top of the time. Definitely your websites where they could go to look more into it,
Sure.
to schedule a consultation, or just to start to get the process going. Because this is a great time. Definitely would love to have you come back on the show because I want to dive a little bit a little bit deeper. Because I say, how much longer do we have? So now this is great. So how do they get in contact with you? If you could share your website and how can
Yeah.
they? Because I see you have two websites, and I wanted you to touch on that over me so they
Yeah.
understand.
So I'll talk about two main ones. So the first, from a clinical standpoint, we love helping people. We're working to try to get the doors open with the VA system so that we can directly handle veterans, but we're trying to make sure it's done on the terms that will help in the brain health category, not the spinal health category. That's where it's a little tough. If anybody can help with that, I'm all ears. Reach out to us. Um, but yeah, so Cerebral Chiropractic Center is in St. Petersburg, Florida. Our website is cerebralchiropractic.com. At the clinic, we focus on that cranio-cervical work where we're evaluating and correcting misalignments and instabilities in the neck that are affecting a lot of these more challenging neurological functions and post-concussive syndrome and the MTBI symptoms that have been lingering around for a long time. So reach out if you ever have any questions. We'd love to help. The other website is what we're launching right now called mtbiresearch.com. It is a research study we are launching. We're working to try to partner with SOCOM on some of their research requests for brain health. And in that study, we're going to be taking 400 participants, almost all veterans, combat veterans, who have experienced either head impacts, massive whiplashes, or blast injury type injuries. And then we're bringing through approximately 45 ex-NFL players too in the same study to do some comparables. But we're going to be doing a large scale diagnostics, imaging and neurological testing, cognitive testing, symptomatic profiles, so we can see all the associated data between what we see on various types of images and what it means from a functional and clinical standpoint and a mental health standpoint, so we can start to trace the majority of these MTBI symptoms back to their pathophysiological roots. Patho meaning the problem side. So physiology is how it normally works. Pathophysiology is how it works wrong. So we're basically building out a pathophysiological root cause model of MTBI through this study. It is very ambitious. We have a huge amount of support behind us. As of last week, we actually just got the Amen clinics and their foundation that's behind us. So like they're going to be backing us. They're a national
Wow.
organization.
Congrats.
Um, we are seeking if it's okay, like we are
Yeah,
seeking
sure,
help in a
please.
couple main categories. We are fundraising. This is not a cheap study especially because of the imaging that we're doing. We're not doing it alone out of Cerebral Chiropractic. We're partnering with Amen Clinics, another imaging center, Genesis Brain Institute, and we are going to be diving really deep into treatment modalities that can change the health of the brain and see its effect on veterans long term. So, fundraising is a huge one. Veteran organizations that can do it, people who have connections. We have family foundations and some more significant donors that are really trying to back this and make this thing happen, even if the government, SOCOM, and various other sources can't contribute. We're trying to make it happen outside that. We're also raising support through letters of support. I mean, if anybody's listening and they have an organization and they'd like to back this study, even just by name, just saying, "Hey, we're rooting for you," the letters of support actually carry a lot of weight. And so these veteran organizations and these, wounded warrior types and the MTBI type organizations that are really trying to help these veterans, we need that type of support, even if it's by name and just by rooting us on and connecting us with the right people. And then the third is hopefully about midsummer, we'll be opening up for applications as research participants to go through the study. It's going to be run through the Tampa Bay area, but if somebody can fulfill the obligations of the study and they're coming from a different area, as long as they can fully participate, we would love to get their name in the mix, and that's something that we're trying to spread the word about. But all that information about the study, some keystones about its design and the problem we're trying to solve is on mtbiresearch.com.
I appreciate that, Chris. And remember, for the viewers and listeners out there, you don't have to drown in this sea of transition. Grab that Vet SOS Lifeline, cut through the noise, reach out to the subject matter expert, Dr. Chris and his team. They're doing something great for the veteran community, for the human community. This one of 80. That's crazy. One of 80. Y'all heard it here first. Thank you so much for coming on. Until next time, everybody, take care. Peace.